Welcome to the Mixology Talk Podcast, where we serve up answers for your cocktail questions, interview top industry professionals, and keep you up to date with what's going on in the world of craft cocktails.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Mixology Talk Podcast, episode number 10.
Can you believe we're already at double digits?
Shiny number 10.
I love it. I'm Julia.
And I'm Chris, and today we're going to be talking about bar tools.
Yeah, people often say they can't make cocktails because they don't have the tools. They think that you need all this fancy stuff that they see in the movies to make a good cocktail.
And you're right, you totally need all those stuff, right?
It's totally wrong. I'm going to go ahead and probably get in trouble with the whole bartending community over the course of this podcast. So bear with me. If you hear screams off in the distance, they're probably bringing their pitchforks. But you really don't need the fancy stuff. You've got stuff in your kitchen you can probably use.
So what we did is I went around and collected all the bar tools I use on a daily basis. So shakers and strainers and everything else I use that I use all the time for my job.
And I went, and for each one of the tools that Chris uses behind the bar, I found a normal kitchen tool that really could act as an equivalent, and you probably already have.
So if you've watched Food Network, you know Alton Brown is kind of ridiculous about doing this. He uses a tool for many, many different reasons, and it's just a really creative way of implementing that tool to get the job done.
Exactly. So that's our approach. We're going to look for multitaskers and quite possibly sock puppets.
I hope so. I hope they're sock puppets. So let's go ahead and start, shall we?
So the first bar tool that most people normally think of is the shaker. It's kind of the quintessential bar tool. People think of bartenders, people think of shakers.
Yeah, and it's just, you hear that shaking, you know you're going to have a cocktail, and we use that like all the time. It is our number one tool that we have behind a bar. So what I use behind a bar is pretty specific. I have a very small 16-ounce pint glass metal tin that's non-weighted, and to go over the top of it to join the two together, I have a weighted 28-ounce tin. So they're both metal pieces. So if you do want to buy some bar tools for home, what I would actually recommend is to do a pint glass for the bottom of the 16-ounce tin, and then just use a regular 28-ounce tin on top of that. Now, the reason that I prefer using metal is because I make a lot of cocktails in the course of an evening, and eventually glass is going to break, and the odds are stacked that it's probably going to break in my hand. So, you know, if you're doing 1 or 2 cocktails a night, you're never going to really have that problem. But for somebody that's doing a lot of volume cocktails, it's definitely a concern.
And they're a little easier to work with, right? When you have the glass?
Yeah, they're a lot easier to separate from the metal.
I can attest to that. I've had some awkward moments of banging shakers against walls trying to get them open. Real classy-like.
Super classy. So that's the reason I use all metal. So if you're just doing it at home, I definitely recommend just using a tempered glass, and you can always tell if the glass is tempered because it has a little T at the bottom of the glass.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, at the very on the foot of it. It'll have a T, or something that looks like a T anyways. So yeah, just use that instead, and it's going to be just fine for cocktails at home.
What about the shakers with the funny cap on top?
Yeah, you could definitely use those as well. Actually, those are really great to use for home bars. My only problem with those that I've noticed in my beginning bartending career is that they tend to freeze up on you. So the metal just kind of contracts, and it just forms this almost unbreakable seal that...
Is that like a high volume problem, or like is a home bartender possible to run into that too?
If you're making 1 or 2 cocktails a night, you're not going to have that problem. But if if you're making 5 or 10 cocktails for a party, you might want to just go ahead and buy the glass and the metal together.
You do look cooler.
It's
true. With the 2-part shaker, you do look cooler.
I know. It's true. It's true.
So what if you don't have any of this stuff? Shakers are kind of a specific item. And what they're really intended to do is to give you something to shake liquid with ice. So with that in mind, I dug around the kitchen and found myself a glass jar with a snap-on lid. You could use Tupperware or one of those Nalgene type water bottles as well.
Nalgene.
I know, that's like a throwback to like high
What
school.
Is Nalgene?
Have you never heard of Nalgene?
I've never heard of Nalgene.
It's like one of those water bottles with a screw top lid.
You could totally use that. Sure.
I can't believe you've never heard of Nalgene. Chris and I were not in high school at the same time, clearly.
No.
Anyway, you could use a screw top water bottle as long as it has a wide enough lid that you can get your ice in and out and use a strainer. and basically something that's going to be watertight. So yeah, so you could throw your cocktail in there, throw in your ice, give it a good shake, and you should be able to shake no problem.
Yeah, that's actually a really good recommendation.
Thank you.
No, I think
I made
it's
it
a
up
great
myself.
idea. And so the next thing is mixing glasses. So if you go out to those fancy cocktail bars and you order a Manhattan, and they have that beautiful glass that they stir it in, that's what we call a mixing glass. Now, in San Francisco, they're all the rage, and cocktail bars in general, you can definitely find them out there. But Julia's found a alternative to the mixing glass.
You know what? I'm going to cheat on this one. Well, not really cheat, but you can really use the same thing. The key here is you want a large glass with preferably a vertical walls. You can use a pint glass. You can definitely use a pint glass. I do usually, the real, quote, I'm doing the bunny ears right now. The real mixing glasses have vertical walls. So that's something that you could look for in just a large glass. But the jar that I used as a shaker has vertical walls and it's big enough. So that was something that I was going to use as a mixing glass as well.
Yeah, and so the one that I use at home and at the bar is what we call a Uri glass. So Uri is actually a pattern. It's kind of a diamond cut pattern in the glass. And it's just a really beautiful, kind of attractive glass. So that's what I use behind the bar.
Yeah, if you want to look like you work in a San Francisco cocktail bar, you have to have a Uri mixing glass. They all have the same exact one, which Uri, it sounds like a brand. It's actually the name of the pattern, like Chris mentioned. So if you Google it, you'll see lots of different options. But yeah, that's definitely the one that we have at home as well.
Yeah, and you don't really need it, but it is really a beautiful, beautiful touch.
You totally don't. You really don't.
So the next thing we're going to be talking about is something that I have kind of a moderate to extensive collection.
So you know how some women kind of collect shoes, and every time they go to the store, they have to buy like another pair of shoes? Like, not that I have a problem with that, but some women are like that. Yeah, Chris has the same problem with bar spoons.
I love bar spoons.
How
It's
many?
totally
How
true.
many? I almost said pairs. How many bar spoons do you own?
I lost count.
That's a problem.
If you have a really cool bar spoon, send it to me, please.
Please don't.
Please do. But
He has some awesome bar spoons. Don't get me wrong. You'd be amazed the variety that you can get. Just basically long neck spoon.
and they are really, really effective. So bar spoons, in my opinion, are one of the unsung heroes of the bar. They're gorgeous pieces of
Kind of
tools.
art.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
are. They can be. And they're very, very functional. So you can use it as a measuring device. You can use it to chill and dilute your cocktails in that beautiful Uri mixing glass that we talked about earlier.
Or your Tupperware.
And it's a really, really beneficial tool to have behind the bar.
Yeah, and so what's the difference between a bar spoon and a normal spoon for somebody who may not have seen them side by side?
Right. So like your normal spoon that you eat soup with, it kind of has a flat edge to it, and it's fairly long, about the size of a fork. And you can just grab it and drink things with, like soup.
We're talking about the soup spoon?
Soup. Yes,
Okay.
soup spoon.
So describe a bar spoon now.
So a bar spoon is much, I was trying to get to that, but a bar spoon is much longer. It's about twice as length as a normal spoon. And the shaft, if you want to call it that, is the piece that connects the bowl of the spoon with kind of the end of the spoon is really, really slender and typically cylindrical. So that way, when the bowl of the spoon is kind of rubbing against the outside of the glass, it can spin freely between your fingers.
Yeah, it sort of enables a pretty specific stirring technique that actually you did a video on bar spoon stirring technique, didn't you?
Yeah, and it's one of those things. It's like you watch it, you get the idea of it,
It's
and
tricky.
Instantly,
Yeah.
you become a lot better at stirring.
It's still
cocktails.
tricky, though. I will say that. So I'll definitely make sure we include a link to that video in the show notes if you are interested. But yeah, so really, just from a lay person, the difference between a quote unquote normal spoon and a bar spoon is the bar spoons tend to be a lot longer. The shaft is a lot longer. The cup.
The shaft can get pretty long.
Oh, geez.
And sometimes it can be a little bit awkward.
Oh,
when you first start
The
stirring
cup
with it.
of the spoon is usually, it seems like it's a little bit smaller, like teaspoon or smaller size. And sometimes they even have a weight at the end. I've noticed that as well. At the far end, the end of the handle, there'll be a weight there. But
But with a little bit of practice, and a couple tries at it, you'll get pretty good at it. And you'll get used to the awkward feeling.
oh, geez.
Yeah.
So anyway,
We're
if
gonna
you
edit that out, by the way.
don't have We'll see. If you don't have a bar spoon, what can you use? Well, this is probably already guessed. Just use a spoon. It's really the purpose of the spoon is to move your liquid around in your ice to chill it down and dilute it. And so using a normal spoon is just fine for this. I'll be honest, I tried to stir a cocktail with a normal spoon in my faux mixing glass, and it was kind of tricky because the spoon wasn't really designed for it. It didn't have a cylindrical handle, so it was kind of tricky, but you could totally do it. It really is not that hard.
And I do have one good alternative to a bar spoon.
Oh?
For home bartenders, chopstick.
Oh, I could see that.
Yeah.
Who has chopsticks?
Who doesn't?
If you do have chopsticks, that would be a good option.
Yeah.
Or maybe a straw.
You could use a straw.
Yeah,
actually. I've done that in the past.
It's got the cylindrical shape, which allows you to stir it pretty easily. So
yeah, you could definitely use that as well.
we're going way in depth about this. Don't take it this seriously. All you got to do is stir your stuff.
Right, exactly. Stir your stuff. So
That's a new T-shirt we're gonna make.
So the next thing that we're going to talk about is strainers.
Yep.
So in the bartending world, there's a couple different strainers. We actually have 3 different strainers that we use a lot. So the first one with a weird coils on it is called a Hawthorne strainer, and we use that all the time. And if you're going to buy one piece of tool, one strainer for your bar, that's the one to buy for sure.
This is the one that people normally think of when they think of a bar strainer.
Exactly. So, if you go to Macy's or Ross or whatever and you see those bartending kits, and it has that strainer with a coil around it, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, this one usually comes in those bar kits.
Yeah, and if you want to get even more specific, you can have a spirits only. So if you have a mixing glass, this is the strainer that you would use for that. And it's a julep strainer. And finally, the last one is a fine strainer. So
the julep strainer, just for folks who may not have seen it before, just looks like a huge flat spoon with holes in it.
that's exactly what it is.
That's a layperson's description.
Yeah.
And a fine strainer looks exactly like it sounds like. It's just a small strainer with a very fine mesh.
Looks like a colander almost.
Yeah, you could say that.
Yeah.
Exactly. So to generalize, you use the Hawthorne and julep strainers to catch the big chunks of ice as you pour out of your mixing glass or shaker. Then you'll usually fine strain that same liquid before it hits the glass, and fancy bartenders like Chris can do this all in one fell swoop. Or swell food on a good night.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, you don't need to. I think for a home bartender, you could probably skip your fine strainer altogether.
Yeah, so actually you came up with a equivalent alternative to all of these things.
Yeah, so my suggestion here was to just use a normal sort of pasta strainer. There's pasta strainers and there's colanders. And colanders are not what I'm talking about because the holes are really, really big and probably won't do a great job of getting your liquid into your actual glass. But an actual strainer has a fine mesh, not a super fine, but it's got a mesh, and that would work. It would be just fine for straining out the big chunks of ice between your mixing glass or shaker and your glass. So in my mind, you can just use a normal kitchen strainer to catch the big chunks of ice. If you are really, really interested in fine straining, you could probably use cheesecloth.
You could. You might.
Or maybe a coffee filter?
Coffee filter, sure.
Yeah, but I really don't think you need to bother with this step for a home setting. I'm not convinced that it's that necessary, even in a bar setting. But again, the pitchforks are coming, so I'm going to be careful what I say. It does make your drink prettier.
It does make the drink prettier.
It makes the liquid clearer. It means that you don't have any stuff in there.
Yeah, and the purpose of the fine strainer is actually to keep those small fragments of ice from your final cocktail. So imagine when you shake, you start to break up that ice. And then if you only use your Hawthorne strainer, what you're left with is a really delicious cocktail with a layer of ice across the top of it. And slowly that ice begins to melt and water down your cocktail. So that's the big purpose of the fine strainer.
Again, totally skippable.
Yeah.
Is that a word? Skippable?
It is now.
It is now.
So the next tool we're going to be talking about is the baseball bat that we keep behind the bar. I actually call it the small log.
You could use a baseball bat.
You could probably...
Not really.
No.
Don't use a baseball bat.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. But it is our muddlers. So if you order mojitos or caipirinhas, you see the bartender sweating behind the bar and they're holding this giant, essentially looks like a small bat.
Yeah, it's a piece of wood.
Right.
Yeah.
So
maybe
that's
like a police baton almost.
Yeah, actually, you could probably use a police baton.
So if you have a police baton.
Weird. So yeah, think of basically the muddler as a mortar and pestle, where the pint glass is your mortar and the muddler is a pestle. And I think I got that right, but I'm not completely sure.
I think you did.
So
this one is really simple. The purpose of the muddler is to smash stuff. And there's a lot of options for smashing stuff. We debated a couple different options, but what we came down to is just a nice hefty wooden kitchen spoon.
Don't bring me into this argument. I didn't decide on this one.
I'm going to say we. Chris actually wanted to use, if you have a rolling pin that's just the plain piece of wood that doesn't have the rolling handles on the side, you could definitely use that too. I think our rolling pin is like granite, so I wouldn't recommend that.
I would recommend it. Rock, glass, paper? Is that the game or something?
Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. I'm going to use scissors. I'm going to use scissors to muddle. No. So you could just use a good hefty wooden kitchen spoon and use that to smoosh up the stuff in your pint glass.
So the next piece of equipment that we use all the time behind a bar, industrial bar or commercial bar, is juicers. So typically we have, really powerful industrial juicers, either the hand squeezers or the powered ones where you just kind of ream down on it and it extracts a juice. And
this is specifically for citrus, right?
Only for citrus, right?
Yeah.
So lemon, lime, orange, grapefruit. That's what we use. If you want to use pineapple, you can buy an industrial or like a home juice machine.
An actual juicer, yeah.
Right.
But really, what you're going to use 99% of the time is lemons and limes.
Yeah, and they actually make the smaller ones too, the handheld ones, and those are really, really great as well for pressing fruit, like citrus, kind of for cocktails. Those are really, really powerful. So Julia actually came up with her own version of a juicer for cocktails.
Yeah, so I'm going to warn you, this one got a bit messy. I would hope that most kitchens would have some form of citrus juicer because it's not uncommon that you would need citrus for baking and things like that. But if you don't have a juicer, what you could do is just cut your lemon or lime in half and go grab that wooden spoon muddler of yours, and you can just sort of smoosh the wooden spoon in your citrus and pull out all of the juice and pulp. You will need to strain that afterwards, though, because you get all the junk with it.
It was pretty amazing to watch that process happen. I'm not going to lie.
There was a splash zone.
Yeah, there was definitely a splash zone.
Like
there was a lot of
SeaWorld,
laughing. I think
almost.
the dogs ran to
true.
the other room. So, yeah.
But it was effective. It worked. We definitely lost a little bit of the juice.
Yeah.
Hey, wait a minute. But it totally worked. And again, I would hope that most kitchens would probably have some form of citrus juicer, but if you don't, just go with it. Use your hands. Use your pets. Just
use your pets.
Find some way to get the juice out of that
figure it
lemon.
out. If that's the only thing stopping you from a cocktail,
Yeah.
I
believe
think
in
you're
you.
probably going to figure it out, right? So the last piece of bar equipment that I use on a daily basis is a zester. So for peeling away lime zest or lemon zest and adding it to cocktails for a final garnish, that's what I use behind the bar. So
this is a little bit of a trick question because when I looked at the tool that Chris was using for zesting, I found my long-lost vegetable peeler.
that was my vegetable peeler.
I was so mine. So it turns out that for zesting, Chris is actually using a totally normal kitchen vegetable peeler behind the bar. So this is an easy one.
I will actually amend that and say that what you actually want to get is a potato peeler specifically.
Not a normal vegetable peeler?
Not a normal vegetable peeler. And the reasoning is that the potato peeler actually only takes off that really fine, very small amount of skin on your zest. And the white portion of fruit, like lemon, limes, and orange, that white portion, the pith, is actually the bitter component of the fruit. So you don't want to add that to it. So that's why you buy a potato peeler.
So you didn't steal my veggie peeler, you stole my potato peeler.
That was mine.
We're going to go and arm wrestle over this, but in the meantime, like the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. When you're just starting to build your home bar, there's really no need for you to go and buy all these fancy tools. You can really get by without. You might look a little bit funny, and you may see some pitchforks outside your door. Just tell them I sent you and send them over to my house.
Yeah, and for the most part, these bar tools are fairly inexpensive. These are some things that you can add slowly to your collection for a very, very small price. So, maybe you buy one a month, and, at the end of the year, you're going to have a pretty good selection of bar equipment that you could use at your home.
So what would you buy first? Just
a shaker. You got to buy a shaker first.
Got it.
Yeah, in my opinion. So
and
that
then
would be
probably
the first
just
purchase.
bar spoons every month forever.
Forever.
Ever and ever.
Yeah. You wear through them like shoes.
I love it. So if you want to see the specific bar tools that Chris recommends, we've listed them out over at mixologytalk.com/10, along with some photos of our home bar hack alternatives. Say that 10 times fast.
I don't think I want to. So yeah, you can find our summary of this episode and all the notes at mixologytalk.com/10.
So next week, we are going to be talking about something I get asked a lot, and it seems like a silly question, but frankly, I've been asked so often, I think we should talk about it. And that is, how do you decipher a cocktail menu when you go out for a drink? So how do you know what to order when you walk into a bar?
Yeah, it's funny because from the bartending aspect, a lot of bartenders and cocktail creators and bar managers, when they create menus, they try and source some of the most obscure, like crazy ingredients that they can find because as a result, you're not going to be able to recreate that cocktail at home.
Well, not only that, but if there's an umlaut in the cocktail description, you can automatically charge another $1.
Oh, easily.
It's like international law.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely.
So when you go out, you'll know what to order if you listen to next week's episode, I hope. And with a bit of luck, you can find Woolly Mammoth Infused Manhattan. I think that's somewhere in San Francisco.
Yeah, no, it's totally true. Yeah.
I love it. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening again. Again, you can head over to mixologytalk.com/10 for a list of the tools that we talked about today and some goofy pictures.
Yeah, and if you have any cocktail questions, you can submit them there as well. So until next week, have a great night and cheers.
Never miss an episode by subscribing in iTunes or YouTube. And as always, check out the show notes by clicking on the right.